Hello, all of our listeners from the RSS podcast. In today's episode, it's episode 30, we've got Alex Harte coming on. Hey, David, what did you think about it?
It was great. I learned so much about just jobs that I didn't know even existed in sports science because he works for Stats Sport, and I always thought that was just like he's a salesman. He just gets people the product, and that's it. But it's just so much more. Honestly, after the chat, I was like, I wish I had his job. Like his job sounds unbelievable. Being able to travel all over the world, helping like professional football teams, working with professional athletes. So yeah, I thought it was
And
unbelievable. What do you think?
I'll tell you what, he not only dropped knowledge, but he also told us some great stories about some Premier League stars that you guys may know as well. So if I were you guys, I'd really want to listen in, right? Because you're hearing some fun stories from anything to do with football, all the way through to some knowledge bombs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
This is episode 30. We are the RSS podcast. Let's go. All right, and today for a little bit of a catch-up, instead of that catch-up, we've got quick-fire questions for David. I feel like a
This
news
is-
reporter. David, are you ready for quick-fire questions?
It's been a while. I'm out of practice. Oh, yes.
Correct answer, David. All right, are you ready for the first one, David?
Let's go. Come on.
If you had to eat one thing for every meal going forward, what would you eat?
Salad. Because you can make so many different salads. You can make regular salads. You can make pasta salads. You know, like the diversity on the salad.
My dad said potatoes.
I mean, but you can do a lot with potatoes as well, though. Like you can make mash. You can bake them. You can make fries.
I just said steak. Meat.
I think salad because technically there's lots of things that come. Potato salad.
All right, you can have salad. Me and Liver King, we're gonna have meat. Steak, we're gonna get big. All right, if someone were to play you in a movie, who would you want it to be?
Wait, say that again. Say it again.
If someone were to play you in a movie, who would you want it to be?
It's got to be Brad Pitt. It's got to be Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt or Orlando Bloom.
Definitely a tiger because he has the eye of the tiger.
He does have the eye of the tiger.
Are you sure about that?
If you could spend a day in someone else's shoes, who would they be and why?
Oh, somebody else's shoes. Alex Harte, our next interviewer, Alex Harte. That's who I'd want to. Day in the life of working with professional athletes.
That's actually and find out more by the way when it comes later. But last question, David: British athletics or Canada athletics?
Listen. British athletics is paying me, and I love the experience. But you gotta go with the home country. You gotta go with the home nation. Canada all the way. Come on.
There we go. What a way to end it, eh?
Yeah,
eh?
Absolutely. Eh? And with
let's
that.
talk about.
No, but we do have a great interview lined up, and we should jump to that right now. So make sure you listen, like, share, subscribe on YouTube if you're listening or watching there. Make sure you follow us on Instagram. Let us know what you think in the comments. Share it if you like it. We really appreciate it. Without further ado, Alex Harte.
Hi guys, welcome to this week's episode of the RSS podcast. Today we've got a special guest once again. His name's Alex Harte. He's a senior sports scientist responsible for assisting elite teams in the implementation of player tracking technology and data analyst at Stats Sports. He's worked at clubs such as Ealing Trailfinders, a sports science intern at Liverpool Football Club. He's got his degrees from University of Essex and from Liverpool John Moores University. It's Alex Harte. Let's get right into it then. How are you, mate?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
So I know who I'm gonna go to when I need to get my stats done for my PhD. I'm just gonna drop Alex a message. Stats guy. Nice.
Very much so. No, we're keen to help with research whenever we can.
Amazing. Perfect.
There you go. As always, we would like to know more about you and your journey to your journey through uni to all these clubs, and then how have you ended up here here on this podcast, essentially.
No, definitely. I mean, I'll jump in with the education side first and foremost. So, as you said in my brief, my undergraduate degree is from the University of Essex. I was really fortunate when I was at the university to pick up a couple of unpaid roles, and in my final year, a paid role with the strength and conditioning department. So, in the first year, it was very much the less glamorous jobs that a sports scientist would have to do. I mean, one of my roles was collecting urine for some of the players and analysing their hydration status before games. They were student athletes, so it wasn't the most glamorous of jobs, and definitely, I think if we had looked at the alcohol substance in the urine, I think we'd have found something else rather than just dehydration. But then in the third year, it was very much. I was very fortunate to work with a guy called to Justin Mills, who's still at the university. He's the head of strength and conditioning. The university is quite a unique one. It has three focus sports, which are volleyball, basketball, and rugby sevens. So obviously not too much you can do with the GPS there, apart from the seven side of things. But really great time in the gym, lots of contact time with the athletes, which is really good. From there, I decided that I wanted to pursue further education and go on and you know firsthand the sports science is an incredibly competitive field. It's getting more and more difficult to acquire a full-time role with just your bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter how much experience you have, you kind of need to tick that master's box. So I went up to Liverpool John Moores University to do my master's. Fantastic course, fantastic lecturers, but I'll be very honest and say that I had an eye on working at one of the football clubs and also trying to get some tickets as well when they came available. So yeah, went up to John Moores, studied my master's in strength and conditioning. Alongside that, I worked as a sports science intern with Liverpool Football Club. That was some experience with the first team. Majority of the experience was with the academy, which was fantastic, and kind of analysing their fitness data. So as well as the GPS, things like heart rate, jump monitoring, ultimately things that would try and inform our program design and our developmental program design. And again, a little bit of that was with the women's team as well, which obviously they're quite separate. So probably the only person in the world to have a Premier League win and a women's Super League relegation in the same season on my CV, which is goes to show. I don't think it was me on either of those cases. So yeah, finished up at John Moores. The really nice thing about that pathway and that master's degree is that you finish with a placement. So I went down to Ealing Trailfinders back down in London. As you can tell, it's a little bit closer to home than Liverpool. So obviously did some time at Ealing, looked after the majority of the academy, but had some first team duties as well, which was really fun. Jumped in with a GPS, and this kind of opened that door of GPS monitoring. Whilst at Ealing as well, as I collected some data, did some case study analysis, and have managed to publish a couple of studies off the back of that. So one of which is in the Journal of Sports and Exercise Science, looking into the relationship between physical characteristics, so the data from squat, bench, combined sprint data and some jump data, and the technical performance parameters, so line breaks, clean breaks, things like that. We kind of found that speed ultimately does kill in rugby. It's the biggest kind of differentiating factor between those who do score tries and those who don't. And then the other study was just kind of a narrative review of the elite space. So what is differentiating factors in International Rugby Union and Premiership Rugby Union, things like that. Obviously, you can see there's a general theme of data and statistics and looking at the GPS. So a role came up with StatSports. Obviously, I'd used the system comprehensively at both Liverpool and Ealing, and decided to take the plunge on more of a business development minded role, where my role at the minute is to, as you say, assist elite clientele. So those who are using our products and our services, assisting them in how to implement the system and get the most out of the system from a data and analytics perspective. But what's quite unique about my role as well is I'm responsible for assisting our elite business development team. So the likes of, obviously, Matt, you've had dealings with Scott before, and we've got a fantastic team of business development managers who ultimately offering them product expertise, getting on site with clubs across Europe and across the world, and trying to further our client acquisition process. Ultimately, we want to work with teams, not not just be a marketplace for teams to buy equipment from.
No, 100%. Yeah, thank you for that little rundown. It was nice to hear. So while you were at Ealing, did you know a player, a winger, Luke Talbot? Does that name ring a bell?
Yes, yeah, I do.
He's at
Yeah,
Tunbridge Judians now.
brilliant. Yeah, no, I remember Luke.
Nice. We'll compare stats later. I'll see if he's gotten any slower or something.
I don't want to do him a
Compare stats
disservice.
No, so I mean, yeah, I mean Liverpool. What was it like? Like, was there any massive differences you noticed working in Liverpool with those three teams, like the academy, first team, and then the women's team as well?
Yep. So it was pre. They built a new training facility called the AXA training ground. That was pre that. The first team was still very much at Melwood. The academy were in Kirkby, and the women's team were actually in Tranmere. So they were across the water on the Wirral. In terms of what I've seen posts going in, and obviously speaking with those who still work at the club, it's that integration, bringing them all together onto one site. I know the women's team is still to this day not on that site as well, which is something I think the club are trying to address. But yeah, it makes it more difficult. I definitely think of being on different sites for the academy players to see that progression to the first team. I mean, we really benefited from a fantastic coaching staff at the first team level, bringing players across and obviously being able to be involved in first team training sessions. But it was not few and far between. It happened commonly, but it wasn't the same kind of as it would be now with them ultimately on the same facility, being able to see if you're a young centre half, Virgil van Dijk is two doors down in a changing room. It's a very different process. What it meant is we were very reliant on the sharing of data, and that's something that Stat Sports are fantastic at, is that you can share data seamlessly throughout players, teams at the same club and throughout different squads. Ultimately, data continuity is huge. You don't want people dropping through the gap and being missed and things like that. Ultimately, it's not very much when it comes to load management and load monitoring. I'm very much of the opinion it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, rather than it's that missed session that ultimately costs you. It's not having that full gauge, because if we're not monitoring as much as possible and we're missing quite a lot, then you might as well not monitor anything at all, in my opinion. But yeah, no, it was. I think things have definitely improved from a management perspective across multiple players. But no, we did the best. We did absolutely the best that we had, and we had some really, really brought in people to that process.
And that's unbelievable. I'm just wondering, of like communication wise, kind of two questions. Did you find a difference of how you had to communicate depending on what team that you were communicating to, whether it was the first team, the academy team, or the women's team? Like, was there a difference? How did you kind of navigate that and find that?
It's very much what I think is a nice balance is with the first team, especially because of the amount of money involved and the risk and things like that. Everything is performance focused, especially right. I think when you're working with coaches who have come from different models, which is a really exciting thing. Obviously, there's different models depending on different countries, and obviously the Portuguese model is kind of world famous. That tactical periodization, despite me not liking the words, that's their model and things like that. The German model is very different. The English model is very different. People have different ways of implementing the same concepts, but the implementation obviously is the essential part. So at the first team level, it was very much performance driven. Everything was related back to the competition or back to the game. So things like accelerations and decelerations for a sports scientist, they're very indicative of change of direction and change of speed. Obviously, that's obviously with a coaching staff, you have to be a bit more nuanced than the neuromuscular load of changing direction or changing speed. It's very much we related things to pressing and counter pressing. So ultimately, it bleeds a bit more into that. There's a reason that we're training this. There's a reason that we're looking to develop this from a physical perspective, and it's to improve their technical and tactical performance. With the academy, it's very much more of that developmental focus. You're looking to prepare them for the next stage of their career, but you don't know what that stage is going to be. If we were all fantastic and brilliant at our jobs, obviously that might mean that they're going to play first team football at Liverpool Football Club. Not every single player who comes through the academy, it's a very, very small percentage do. So we need to prepare them for pretty much any circumstance or scenario they could find themselves in. An example of that is ultimately, look, you see players this season, obviously there are injuries that happen. Players like a Stefan Bajcetic or Tyler Morton, who's now down at Blackburn, these kind of players have to step into first team roles.
Yeah.
We need, as a performance staff, to basically be able to say, or physical performance staff, be able to say they are ready to do this from that physical perspective. Obviously, there's plenty of developmental work that can happen, but in terms of that kind of bottom line box ticking exercise, the way I always relate it back is to use a basketball analogy. You're not gonna be a power forward in basketball if you're not around 7 foot. It just doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that bottom line has to be met from a physical perspective. If you can't cover very generic data, but if you can't cover 10,000 meters total, if you're a central midfield player and you can't cover 10,000 meters total distance, 60 to 100 accels and decels a game, 1,000 meters high speed running, then when you jump into that Premier League scenario, you are more disposed to injury. You are more disposed to a poorer performance from a physical perspective. You might have a great game. We know players like Andrea Pirlo and even Lionel Messi have large walking distances. They're not covering high speed running, but their technical and tactical game is there. Academy players, it's not quite to the same extent. Therefore, ultimately, we need to be able to kind of at least cover that physical perspective, in my opinion.
That's so interesting. And one thing that I want to ask on again, on you mentioned kind of the nuances in talking to coaches, and I think that going from like science to sport and then having knowledge but being able to bring it across in a way that's understood is so difficult. And I think you work in a very difficult position because data often scares people who don't come from like a science background. So how did you find that? Did you ever have, I guess, how did you get good at it? How did you get good at transferring the knowledge from science into sport in a way that was understood and brought on board? Did you learn from people? How did you find that? Was there any time where you did it poorly, and what happened from that, or how did you learn from that moving forward?
Yep. So to answer your question around how did I get better, it will, for students especially, this is the kind of biggest caveat, is failing. You need to fail. You need to get it wrong to get it right. So the big one. So I'll give you an example from Ealing. I'd sit for hours on visualization software like Power BI or Tableau, and I'd sit and I'd make these very pretty, very nice graphs and tables and things like that. I'd take it to the coach, and the coach is not interested. They've got 1,000,001 different jobs. It's not, if it's not for me, if you can't communicate your data in an understandable way and be able to bring takeaways to the table, because ultimately there's no benefit to me saying X, Y, and Z for total distance, high speed running, accelerations, decelerations, the generic kind of external load measures, if it then doesn't either influence session design and training design or influence coach decision making, which again bleeds into that session design perspective. It's very much, you need to relate it to things that matter to coaches. In a rugby perspective, ultimately things like the kick chase for kind of getting high speed running and maximum speed, conversations going, a massive, obviously I'm talking very much locomotor characteristics at the moment, but for rugby coaches, we know that the element of the game around collisions and collision load, that's a huge element in the game that's often misinterpreted in terms of external load characteristics. For example, if you're a front row forward, you're not going to get much high speed running in a game. Some coaches might use that as a stick to beat a player with if their numbers are low in comparison to other positions. But if they're recording 3 times, 4 times the amount of collisions, we know their neuromuscular load is probably going to be through the roof. They won't benefit from training in the same way that a winger, a fullback, or a centre will. They're a very unique position on the field. So it's being able to communicate that in an understandable way that they can relate. Huge one for that is we loved to relate everything back to the game. To be able to say, this is how much we did in terms of volume and intensity compared to this game that we played when the players said they were blowing, they were struggling, we might have won, we might have lost, things like that. For example, if we know that in order to beat Manchester City at the Etihad, this was what it looked like from external load characteristics, what did training look like as a comparison to that? Because then coaches can kind of make that a little bit more understandable in their own heads and saying, instead of low, medium, heavy, in terms of relation to things like worst case scenarios, which I know is getting a lot of bad attention at the moment in literature, and I can agree with that in terms of a physiological perspective, but in terms of communicating data, to coaches, I think it really has value in terms of relating their drills, their exercises, what they're doing on the training pitch to what the players are facing in the game. Because ultimately, we like to spin this as physical coaches and analysts. The game is the most important part. The match is the most important part. If we are not influencing what happens there, we aren't going to be in a job for very long.
Right, right. Or at least at some point, what we're doing is going to change what we do. Do you go into those conversations with kind of a hierarchy of, in your mind, even if you don't say it, of best case scenario, this is what I'd like to see done, and this is my professional opinion, we should do this XYZ. But do you come kind of with a hierarchy, if they don't want to do all of that, this is kind of the second best that I would think we can do, or if it's the first isn't feasible, do you go, like, do you think that's, I don't know, do you think that's valuable, or is it not?
Definitely. I mean, what I love about the training plan and training program design is that it's 50% objective data. So what is the GPS as an example? What does the microtechnology tell us? What is that objective information that we can't argue with? And 50% or more sometimes can be the subjective, the coach's experience. There's a reason why they are paid so highly. There's a reason why ultimately they are everything. If it goes wrong, it's their head on the chopping block. In that analogy, it's that metaphor. It's their head is on the chopping block. So that's ultimately, I will come to the table. I will come to coaches with my own narrative of what I want to spin from a physical perspective, or ultimately that's the expert I am. In those scenarios, I am the physical training expert. Ultimately, I know what I want to achieve. However, I have had scenarios where a coach has said, look, this is what we're going to do. And if anything, it's been better than the training plan that I had in my head from a objective markers, because we still hit the same objective markers, but he's satisfied from a subjective coach experience viewpoint. I don't, not too much as a best case scenario, because again, that would be not arrogant, but in terms of, from my opinion, is ultimately me believing that I know better than the coach, and in some areas I will, in some areas I won't. It's very much a case of, I will come with my opinion backed up by objective data. My favorite saying of this is someone told me that a coach once said is if you have data, we'll have a conversation, but if we have an opinion, we'll go with mine. That's very much a case of, they're the ones who are paid. They're the ones who are paid the big money. They're the ones who ultimately are. You often see less so nowadays, but definitely when I was coming through it within the football club and the rugby club, it very much was a case of, if there was a coaching decision to be made, it would be the head coach, and the performance staff would stay. So if we aren't to blame when things go badly, we can't also be the ones responsible when things go well. It's a team that works together, and being able to kind of come with my opinion backed up by objective data obviously strengthens the case. We succeed when we work collaboratively. We don't succeed when we ignore each other or believe that we are smarter or have a better opinion than someone else. Ultimately, when if I can influence their decision making with some objective data, that's great. But if their decision making is based solely around the objective, then they might as well get me to do the training design. And ultimately, there's a reason why I'm not paid the same money that Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp are. It's because they come with their own expertise.
Like the links. Yeah, I remember I went down to Ealing as well, and I got there 7 a.m. just for like a little shadow with the S&C coach. I think it was Nick Gallagher. Do you know him? Yeah. So he 100%. He let me come down for a couple of days, and then I just sat in that first coaches meeting, and it was just amazing to see, because you don't get taught this at uni during the master's course, or some clubs don't even have this. But I sat down there, and the head coach stood up, and he just directed it like an orchestra almost. He was like, bang, trumpets go, so the forwards coach would just start speaking. Then he'd go, okay, but then how would that influence the scrum coach? And then he would stand up and talk, and then he was just like, and what we like on numbers, who are the three not worst performers, but who need to like really pull their socks up, who aren't hitting their meterage, or are we having any issues along the S&C side? Then he would stand up, and then from there everyone's making notes on what they need to do for that day, and it was just amazing to watch. And even like going to your point that like there is sort of a hierarchy, but like there's a reason why the head coach is getting paid the big bucks. It's because like even going down to Loughborough with their first team, and I could see like the S&C coach had a 15-minute like warm-up plan ready, and then he gets there, and it was going to be like all of them together, and he gets there, and the coach is like, right, you've got 5 minutes with the forwards, and then we're going to bring them back, and then you've got the backs coming over in 5 minutes, and then like, sweet. And that's all you can say, because there's no point arguing, because by the time you've done your arguing or said your point, they're going to be with you there. So you just went, okay, cool, and then got to thinking, like, if you get given the 5 minutes, you got given the 5 minutes, and there's no, you just got to work with it. And at the end of the day, we're here to help the players, so there's no point arguing back. You just need to be on the ball and be the best you possibly can be at that time.
Definitely. I mean, the performance in any sport, aside from, I would say aside from track and field, because ultimately track and field is you run more, you win more. But performance, it's incredibly complex. There was a study in the 2018 FIFA World Cup which found that there was no difference between any of the confederations for distance run, sprints made, accelerations, decelerations, high-speed running. If you were Saudi Arabia, you were doing the same as Brazil. There was no difference at all across any of them. So this, I know it's got a lot of traction this year. Sky Sports is you sprint more, you win more narrative. That just doesn't exist. It's not true. You do need to have physical performance to be able to implement styles of play that have a greater effect on match result and things like that. But just to give you tangible evidence, we found that in teams where we won 6-0 would be our highest running stats of the season, and games and would be our joint highest running stats with games where we lost 6-0 as an example. So those tight games would actually be probably our lowest physical output. So if it just was me being able to influence match result by getting the players as fit as humanly possible, they could run, they could sprint, they could do everything they want at such a higher effort, then quite frankly, Leeds United would have won the Premier League last season. They had the highest sprint stats across the league. I think the highest sprinting stats that have ever been recorded in a Premier League season, and they went to the final day in terms of the relegation battle. So if it was that simplistic, we'd be laughing as a sports science company, because people would come to us for the most accurate data they can possibly get, because it influences the win.
100%. So then would you say that it's not only like there's obviously like you got to get those players to where they're physically performing at their best, but then is it more important to get their technical skills at their like to the closest of their physical performance, in the sense that like you want them to be able to perform all these sprints, but technically as well, that while having a ball by their foot, just keeping it as if it was glued to the foot, you want them to be able to keep it as close to that, I guess.
Yeah. You ultimately you want to identify what are the determinants of performance. What do I know has a tangible link with winning? So obviously, just to make it really, really simple with football, it's goals scored. The more goals you score, the more likely you are to win. Well, what influences goals scored? We know from a technical tactical perspective, it might be things that influence expected goals. So the technical and tactical skill of the players who are responsible for putting the ball in the back of the net. Erling Haaland, for example, is phenomenal at finding space in the penalty area. He is fantastic at leading the attack, things like that, things that ultimately I don't have much of a bearing on. However, from a physical side, I could turn around to the head coach and say, I know from tangible evidence, objective data, that the physical event that precedes 85% of goals scored is a straight line sprint followed by a deceleration. So straight away, in terms of the physical perspective, I need that player to be able to handle straight line linear sprinting and deceleration events. The reason for that is straight line sprinting they're both events that move you away from a defender. It creates space. The more space you have, the greater the likelihood of scoring, because you have more time to do the shooting action. You have more space, especially in the penalty area. Ultimately, if I could influence that way and say, this is why I would like to do a training plan that includes linear sprinting and deceleration. Ultimately, we know what football looks like. Football does look like that anyway. A rugby perspective is, for example, if we say that an effective kick chase is a determinant of performance. It means that the opposition have less territory. They pick up the ball in less territory. They have to kick for territory. We get the ball back at a high position of the field. Another example is from Leinster. A guy called Pete Tierney found that of the 22, the attacking 22 entries, ones that were successful, the forwards were running at a very high running speed. The reason for that is because when they weren't running at a very high running, forwards were running at a very high running speed. The reason for that is because they were already in their attacking set, ready to burst, ready to punch through, ready to accelerate into the line, make their running lines. So ultimately, if I can influence that and say, well, the forwards need to be doing more work on acceleration and ultimately being able to be robust to high speed running demands. It's me. I've influenced it from a physical perspective. I've said that this is a determinant of performance in that perspective, but I've also made it related to winning. To what is it that we need to do to win? If I turn around and said, look, we need to do a lot of running because the lads aren't fit, like they'd turn around and go, well, that's your job. You failed your job there. This isn't helping us win. This is
I guess
helping
it is
you
so important
scratch
to
your
have
own
that
back.
big team objective.
Yeah.
And then say you look at Haaland as a puzzle, and then you're putting your jigsaw piece in, your puzzle piece in to make it all. And then after you've got him to that, say you've increased his running speed, you've increased the amount he can decelerate, the speed he can decelerate at. That's your set. Then you've got the tactical coach who will have to implement, okay, now we've got to look at where is he finding the areas of space to get into? Is he good at that and evading the player? So yeah, you're building little puzzle pieces that can run across the field and try to score goals, so then you don't get sacked, Fun.
Yep. At the very highest level, we're also starting to see it bleed into recruitment. So you will see, like, I'll keep going back to Liverpool, but I'll use Leeds United as a really good example. So Leeds United have a very high intensity style of football. It's obviously Bielsa was on a different planet, and then they brought in Jesse Marsh, who's from that Red Bull group style where it's very much high pressing, counter pressing, transition is key, things like that. They will recruit players who they know are physically prepared to play that style of football. They aren't looking at players they're looking at players who are in the Bundesliga or who are in Austria at Red Bull clubs and things like that, who have already played that style of football. Again, Liverpool, you look at who have they signed in recent years. You see Naby Keita, we're going from Red Bull Leipzig, Ibrahima Konate, Red Bull Leipzig, Sadio Mane had played for Red Bull Salzburg previously. You're starting to see those Takumi Minamino, again, Red Bull Salzburg. They're players who they know that they don't need to do as much work in terms of preparing them physically to do that style of football. It is more the technical, tactical implementation of that style that's different. And you can see that when teams, that's I think always key is if a team is transitioning in style of play, the easiest way to identify that is probably in recruitment patterns, being able to see, someone like a Thiago Alcantara would never have been part of a midfield when Jurgen first came into the football club, because he's changing, it's nuanced and things like that. If you was to look at Manchester City as another example, they've won league title after league title after league title. But if you actually look at their physical running stats, their locomotor characteristics, they're very, very similar to a Wolverhampton Wanderers in terms of lots of ball possession, things like that. They're very I'd say risk averse in transition. They don't love the transition. They like control. That's why I think the two clubs who are most interested in Matthias Nuntz from Sporting last summer was Manchester City, and he went to Wolverhampton Wanderers. They identified him as being able to fit. A Rodri, as an example, would look like a very different player in a Jurgen Klopp midfield to a Pep Guardiola midfield.
You have such unbelievable knowledge of football players. It's unbelievable. And as well as the tactics and how that plays into it. So it's curious that now you're working in the business side of things. And do you miss I have so many questions. Do you miss being on the ground in a football team, making those decisions, having those conversations with coaches, and trying to figure that out for that specific team performance? And then off the back of that, like how did you get into the business side, and what drew you from stepping away from kind of the more in one team on the ground performance for one specific team to the business side of things?
In terms of missing things, I think sometimes you have that I mean, I'm very fortunate. I get to visit some of the most amazing football clubs in the world. I get to obviously witness training and meet with some practitioners who are at levels that I will never be able to achieve in terms of their knowledge and their expertise. That sometimes you come away and you left waning. Sometimes you wish, the phrase is, wish you still had your boots on the field. I'm very fortunate in that I have a few consultancy projects that keep me involved in that kind of realm and being able to provide expertise there. Obviously, get to come on to podcasts like this and have a chat with you guys, which is always great fun. But in terms of my role now, is my favourite part of my previous role was working in a team. I like to collaborate. I like to be able to have my area of expertise, which I pass on and be able to influence how other people operate in terms of in obviously the football environment, in terms of session design, and the rugby environment, again, session training design and decision making. But from that business perspective, is I'm working with people who have expertise that I've never ever even been exposed to. So being able to negotiate things like negotiation and lead generation, things like that, which ultimately I've never had to do before and never had experience working with. So being able to kind of provide my expertise, my insight to those guys, I think it really excited me. And they're a fantastic team at Stat Sports. If anyone's ever had the pleasure of dealing with them, they are phenomenal at what they do. They're very detail orientated, and I'm very lucky to work with them. But
because I guess you're on the other side of it now. You're on the other side of it.
Yeah,
like
literally.
You maybe I don't know how many years ago you thought, oh, it'd be really nice if I could do this with this data, and now you get to take that to the people you work with and work for and be like, actually, can we do this? Because that would be really beneficial for me 3 years ago.
Definitely. Exactly, and plus, I get to provide an outside perspective. It's something that when I was in club environments, I absolutely loved. Is outside perspective. You get very much into your bubble of your team, and having someone kind of come in and go, oh, why don't you have a look at this part? Why don't you look at this metric as an example? It's valid, it's reliable, it's sensitive to change, and it could influence your session design, things like that. It's being able to kind of come in and not audit. I'm not trying to judge but for lack of a better phrase is I kind of get to audit the performance program from an external load management perspective. So kind of go, almost ask the question of why are you looking at this metric? Like what is it why are you collecting 18 different data points but only reporting 4? Why is it that there's no meeting between yourself and the technical staff? Because ultimately they're the ones driving the training design. They're the ones who are driving the increase or decrease in these metrics that you're monitoring. But then there's no feedback process. And if there's no feedback process, you might as well just not be collecting the data, because the only person who's being influenced it is you. And so you're sitting at home and hours on end looking at data, might be grimacing at certain things that are coming up. But if you're not actually feeding back to coaches, then the coaches aren't. There's no process there. Ultimately, your job is in some respects redundant. But yeah, no, I'm very fortunate to work with a great team. Obviously, being able to provide insight there, get to travel to some of the most amazing locations in the world. I mean, this Sunday I'm going to FC Copenhagen versus FC Nordsjælland in the Danish Superliga. Just because I've got a great relationship with the guys at Copenhagen, and ultimately we've got some meetings lined up in Denmark. Meetings lined up in Denmark as well. So it's being able to visit and be involved in organisations which you wouldn't have ever dreamed of. I mean, I've been to the Club World Cup with Stat Sports with the team who won the African Champions League. I mean, that was something that I'd never envisioned. I've been able to be involved with the deal that we did with the New Zealand Black Sticks hockey organisation. Again, Olympic hockey, something I've never had any experience with. But being able to talk with their analysts, to talk with their fitness coaches, their S&Cs, their high performance director, and being involved in that process is just something that you wouldn't have envisioned when working at Ealing Trailfinders, or even back when I was interning at the University of Essex and things like that. It's sport is incredibly fast paced, and being a part of that is fantastic. It does take its toll. I mean, straight away to students out there, sports science is a very attractive job, but there's definitely things that when you get into the role that are unattractive about it. It's long hours. It's very it's incredibly exciting, but it's very reduced flexibility in terms of you might look and I have friends who are teachers, for example.
I'm currently at
and
school
they're
now.
on holiday every other week.
I know.
So
Yeah.
if they've got some time off every other week. And I remember being at Liverpool, for example, and we were going for a league title. Like we were going for a league title and to try and progress in the Champions League. It's relentless. You think of what it looks like for players around Christmas time. It's hard for coaching staffs and things like that. There is a burnout to it, and ultimately you can see that the off seasons are getting shorter and shorter and shorter as they try and pack more and more games in. There is a lifespan to sports science and sports scientists. For example, you don't see many who are above the age of 40 still working in practice. We're in business within the business development. Obviously, it's a business, so it's more of a commercial enterprise. You do have that flexibility. You have the ability to say.
I was going to say, imagine turning up to Jurgen Klopp saying, "Can I please, 2 games until the Champions League final, like, look, can I go to the Maldives, please, with my girlfriend? I know I don't ask this often."
I didn't quite think I didn't think we'd get here. So can I go on that all inclusive?
Like 700, please.
Yeah.
I'm not getting that deposit back, Jurgen. Come on,
Yeah, it's funny when you said like sports science, or there's not as nice things about sports science. It reminded me of what you said at the very beginning. You said that you were lucky to get an unpaid role. I was like, if that's not the epitome of sports science, I don't know what is that. So if you were going to a team with all your experience of being on the boots and then now on the other side of things, if you were asked, because you're about to be asked, the top 3 things that make a successful performance statistic program, the top 3 things that you say you need to have this in place for your performance statistic program to have a shot of being successful.
Sorry, if I could just add to that quickly as well, just like stuff that Stat Sports actually what separates them. Like what does Stat Sports do so well compared to the other companies that are out there?
Yep. In terms of what separates Stat Sports from the rest of the market, we like to. The way I phrase it is we have some guarantees to our clients. So we call them Stat Sports guarantees. The first of those is that we have the most accurate performance data on the market. We have been independently, externally validated by research institutions and clubs across the world more than any other performance microtechnology provider. So you can go and read all of the literature for yourself. There's no black boxes. We don't hide things at Stat Sports. If you want to know how valid and reliable we are, go and read the literature. We will supply the literature for you. We obviously have some internal stuff that we can provide as well. But obviously, if you want external independent research, you can go and read it about Stat Sports, and it comes back as being excellent every single time. I mean, we go to the FIFA quality testing every year. We get our FIFA certificate. We get our FIFA quality testing signed off by FIFA. I mean, just not to have a go at that organisation, but you can pay to be their recommended partner. It's something that we've never done because we want you to actually go away and read what FIFA has to say about us and make your own decisions. As well as that, we have what I'd term as the fastest download times in the industry. So it's a massive thing for workflow for practitioners. You don't want to be waiting hours at end for your data to be downloaded. You can download up to 32 units at one time. You can download a 2-hour session in less than 2 minutes. So it's that accessibility to data that's huge.
Sorry, just quickly.
Industry's leading live data.
Is that
system.
just because you, as an intern, you were just sat there waiting for 2 hours for one pod just to download it, and you thought to yourself, you know what, one day I'm going to change this. One day I'm not going to be sat here.
We could be better. The old
I could be in the Maldives right now. I could be in the Maldives, but no, I'm waiting for these 32 pods to come on.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
That and sitting in sorry.
No, what they don't tell you is that StatX has like 100 interns that are working there for unpaid, downloading everything as fast as possible for all of the performance teams that have their stuff.
Almost like a hamster wheel in the background.
Yeah.
No, the big one for us was in dressing rooms. So we'd sit in dressing rooms, and when I was using, I'm not going to say other providers' names, but when I would be experienced with other providers, you'd sit and you'd be looking at your watch, going, "Everyone's waiting for me to get this downloaded, so I can get back on a coach. We can go home." or go back to the hotel. So being able to kind of just be in the dressing room, click a button, and then 2 minutes later that you're the first one on the coach with everything packed up, already doing the report or already doing your key takeaways for a coach, or you might have even had that conversation. Obviously, I wouldn't advise having a conversation with a coach after a game, because if you've lost, it's just not going in. One of my biggest bugbears is when they ask coaches to do media interviews after a game, because they're still in, even if they've won, they're still in that shock mode of
like
things are
Joshua,
happening around them, but they're not fully there.
After he lost,
Just talking from my experience, if we had a bad result or even a great result, I'd very much be a case of, look, anything I say now, I don't want on camera. Like it's not a true reflection of it's a true reflection of how I'm feeling in the moment, but it's not a true reflection of that kind of cold analytics side of things, where it's you're asking me to judge performance on something where I'm still reeling from it. I'm still in shock from it, things like that. But yeah, just to go on to what I think we do better than anyone else is, like I said, live data is becoming absolutely huge in terms of the application and how it can influence sessions in real time, and being able to kind of say, or even, I know, for example, there's some Premier League teams who use it to influence their substitution policy. So being able to see when players are dropping off in terms of, and when fatigue is starting to have a performance impact, absolutely huge. Not only do we have the most accurate live data, that's why the way the unit's designed is that it calculates all of the metrics on board rather than relying on an external receiver. So it's incredibly accurate. There's no difference between live data and download data. As well as that, it's all inbuilt into the iOS system. So you have live data on an Apple Watch, you have live data on an iPad. So ultimately, if you can have 100% accurate live data on a really accessible platform, really easy to interpret, really easy for coaches to interpret as well, it's a lot more intuitive, it's a lot more flexible. Ultimately, we want to hand that to our clientele. The final point that really separates us is we have an absolutely fantastic account management department. So some of your listeners who might be using other providers in terms of customer support might actually be having an absolutely torrid time. We don't operate like a ticketing process. It's not a call up and speak to someone on another continent or call up and speak to a robot. There's no live chat. It's very personal. You talking to me obviously today. I'm more on the business development side of things, but we have people like me who are fully qualified, industry experienced sports scientists, some of which are still actually in practice. Some of them, there's a few sports scientists at Stat Sports who are still work with the Football Association of Ireland or the Irish Rugby Football Union. They're embedded into those programs whilst also being an account manager at Stat Sports. You have 24/7, 365 access to these people. So if that's like, I'll get this, sports scientists who use GPS will laugh at this because it's a bugbear. It's a huge bugbear for a lot in the industry. But when units accidentally go into a washing machine, these are the people who you communicate to get a replacement. They are waterproof, but not that waterproof, is what I always say. But they're the people you contact to get a replacement. They're the people you contact if you've got questions on specific areas of the system. They're the people you question if you have areas for how you can implement the data and things like that. It's very, very personal, and I think it really sets us apart in the industry.
You know, that's one thing when I was speaking to Scott about, I realised, like, you know, there's so much to not only the metrics that you guys have, but just the support and what you get when you get a GPS. Like, he was even talking about like heart rate monitors that can be included and stuff like that. It was just a lot of help, and it was a great conversation. It was very personal from the get-go. You know, he said, let's hop on a call and talk about this. So it was just amazing. And yeah, I was just wondering, how will Stat Sports go to the next level, or is there any future research that is being done in terms of, like, just data collection?
Yeah, well, we're a technology company, and if you I always think of it as like a shark. If you're a technology company and you stay still, you die. You need to be continually moving forward. You need to be continually innovating. It's something that we're doing. We're innovating the product. We're innovating the software. I mean, you talk to me now. We've got a software release coming out on Monday. That's free to our existing clientele, and it's all based on feedback. It's based on client feedback. We know that while we have, in my opinion, the industry leading product, we also know that there are areas which we can improve on, and the only way we can improve is by going away and saying, you use Stat Sports or you use another provider, if you're using StatSports, what would make your experience even better? And if you're using another provider, why do you prefer that provider to us? Is it sometimes it's just down to cost? Obviously, if we are the premium, we are also often the most expensive, and we understand that. But at the same in the same regard is ultimately there's a reason if you're using competitors and you can justify the cost of it of changing over. Why aren't you? What's the reason for that? Is it something that we could go away and develop? I mean, one of the ones that we did last year was the English FA came to us and said that we'd like to see accelerations and decelerations per minute live because it's something that we base our small-sided games on. Great idea. We went away and we developed it and we added it as a free update on the App Store, on the Apple App Store. I think a month later. So it's something that we are continually developing. It's something that we're very proud of. And yeah, just to go back to the other question in terms of performance statistics and what are the most important things, one is metric selection. So you need to pick valid, accurate, and sensitive metrics, as well as that being reliable. So valid, they need to say they need to measure what they say they measure. Mm-hmm. Reliable, if I was to do the same tests or the same activity in the same environmental conditions, do I get the same number? Mm-hmm. And sensitive, do they pick up changes in the measures that they're supposed to pick up? So one of the ones we did was a research study at the University of Suffolk, we have a metric called dynamic stress load. It's an indicator of neuromuscular fatigue. The player got more fatigued, the metric changed. That said that it's sensitive to changes in neuromuscular fatigue. It's a sensitive metric, hugely vital. Again, we really believe in that independent external research. If we was to go and do it, which we do, but if we was to go and do it and then report it, it doesn't carry the same strength as someone who is not affiliated with StatSports going away and doing it. It's not good science. We believe in that.
The first thing someone does after reading that is looking down in the acknowledgements, and if there's any, what's the word I'm looking for? Contradictions.
Yeah.
If it's like, oh yeah, this was sponsored by Stats, immediately you go,
Yeah, it's like that famous one, isn't it? It's that famous one with the sugar. It's finding of saturated fats.
Paid for by the sugar companies.
Yeah.
This ad was not paid for by the tobacco companies. Very much so. Ultimately, in terms of that, you need to have, as well as there's obviously having valid, reliable, and sensitive metrics, you need to have a feedback loop. So you need to establish a feedback loop. There's no point collecting all of this data if it then doesn't get fed back to players. Players are becoming more and more interested in their data. It can influence their decision making. It can influence their recovery protocols. Is a huge one. Ultimately, they know their bodies better than I'll ever know their bodies. But if I can give them some objective data that says you need to be doing this from a recovery perspective, then loads of high speed running, infrared might be really useful. Heat therapy might be really useful because we know that the hamstring and the posterior chain really likes that post high speed running. Forwards in rugby, you've done loads of collisions. Well, you need to get some ice on that. You need to reduce the inflammation. Massive from that in terms of the recovery protocol. That's objective data informing decision making from the player's perspective. Obviously, we've spoken at length about how it can inform the coaches. But if that feedback loop doesn't exist, then ultimately the monitoring, there's no real incentive to doing any monitoring, really. So obviously metric selection, you've got your feedback loop, and then ultimately you need to identify what your determinants of performance are. You need to identify, there's no point having massive one. There's no point collecting high speed running in basketball because they don't do it.
They won't be.
Same goes for in rugby. Exactly that. In rugby, you can also obviously I think in my opinion accelerations and decelerations are important in rugby because obviously they indicate when change in speed and change in direction. But you can make an argument that decelerations aren't as important because a lot of the time you're decelerating in rugby, you're not choosing to do it.
That's what I was going to say. I was reading some of these.
You're running into a wall.
I'm using some. That's the thing. I was doing some GPS stuff on a game, and I saw our centre got both hit and then stop. And I was looking, and then I saw his deceleration was massive compared to everyone else. And I was wondering, is there an actual way to differentiate a collision to a chosen voluntary deceleration? But it was just interesting in the question.
Yep. So to answer that question, yes, it's something that we're incredibly proud of this metric. So we have a metric in our rugby suite called collisions. It's called collisions, and there's one called collision load, which is just a number multiplied by the magnitude of the collisions. So obviously every collision is not the same. That's all done by the accelerometer. So the accelerations and decelerations are monitored by the GPS or the GNSS now. So GPS is an outdated term. That's just the American satellites. GNSS is a new term. That is GLONASS, Galileo, Beidou. I always hesitate when I'm going to say this. The Russian satellites as well, as much as you don't want them to be. But it's any satellite signal in the world. So, for example, in a nice open field, you can get up to 28, 29, 30 satellites on one play at one time. Phenomenal levels of data accuracy there, rivaling the likes of a local positioning system as an example. But yeah, so that's all. The accelerations and decelerations are calculated by the GNSS. So via the Doppler effect, obviously it's a change in speed, but the collisions and the collision load are monitored by the accelerometer and high impact accelerometer. So that measures changes in acceleration. So obviously in a collision event, there's a huge change in acceleration because you suddenly go from going one way to going the other. So with that data, we can give you a few more metrics around collisions. We can do things like time to feet after a collision, which guys at the IRFU has identified as a determinant of performance. If their time to feet post collision is higher, they are losing games because they're not back in the defensive line. Things like average acceleration post collision. So after they've had a collision, they get back to their feet. Are they accelerating to the same magnitude, or is that collision having an effect on their acceleration performance? Things like that. It's that deeper level of insight that we can provide with accelerometer. Again, to go back to that valid, accurate, and reliable point, Ulster Rugby went away and they made a video analyst sit down and watch, I think it was 18 games of rugby, and they had to count every time there was a collision, and they compared it to our collision load metric and our collisions metric on the StatSport system, and found that we had 98% levels of consistency.
Wow.
So that you can have 100, you pretty much have complete confidence that we are picking up things that an analyst is picking up.
That's amazing.
So you can trust that metric.
That
Again,
poor intern.
that if we came out with that and said, look, you can definitely trust our metric because we've done this study and it says so. Ultimately, you take that with a bit more pinch of salt. It's like Coca-Cola coming out and saying, look, we've got this really healthy bottle of Coke. Ignore those scientists over there. We've done the analysis, or any other drinks providers for that matter.
Just take a sip. Yeah. Just take a sip. It's okay.
That's incredible, Alex. Thank you so much for bringing all of your knowledge, experience to this podcast. That's been incredible. I think so. I just want to recap really quickly. Those three things that you said were the most important for kind of a performance statistic program. Metric selection, so that obviously you need to be reliable, valid, sensitive. You have to have a good feedback loop, whether that's to the coaches, to the athletes, to the stakeholders, and then to determine what impacts performance and what can you measure that actually can change performance.
Definitely.
I think even for me and sports scientists, when people get into sports science, they don't know what's out there. And for me, when I think of like someone who worked honestly in your position, I would think a salesman. I wouldn't think a sports scientist. And so if like it was unbelievable to hear your story and how you got into it. And actually, there's so much more into that. And for people out there not sure what they're wanting to do, this is a hugely valid area that you can get into, and extremely exciting because like you said, you have your projects on the side that you get to do. You get to go to unbelievable clubs and work with players and practitioners all over the world, and that's something honestly before this conversation that I had no idea about. So really appreciate you coming on. So I just want to thank you. We do have quick fire questions to finish it off. But just wanted to say that was incredible to hear your experience and your story, and just to gain from that knowledge that you've obviously gotten from all the experience that you have. So yeah, just thank you.
No, thank you for having me.
And Matt, take it away.
Awesome. First one. What's the one item you would have on a desert, starting nice and light?
I know these are quick fire. The very cold scientist on me says a way off. No, it's probably Probably I'd say a box of matches or a lighter, because I can't. I've done it before. I've done the Duke of Edinburgh over obviously here in England, as I can't start a fire.
No,
And no, definitely, yeah.
that's class. And then
Nice.
funniest moment with an athlete.
Oh, funniest moment of an athlete. I won't name the athlete, but he's a superstar footballer from Egypt. We were talking about recovery protocols, and I was mentioning Paul, like swimming in terms of the hydrostatic pressure and the effect that can have on lactic acid and things like that. And he said, I said, look, I got up a list of local pools around his area, and he went, no, I've got one in my house.
Unreal. Unreal.
Yeah.
Casual.
Okay, well, I'll be going to that pool, and that's hilarious.
Yes,
You're definitely
very much so. I think it
talking
was-
about Firmino, right? Yeah. Highest top speed recorded.
In ones that I've witnessed in the flesh, 37.18 kilometers an hour.
And was that by David? Yeah, David with the wheels. With the wheels.
Yeah.
No, that was
on my bike, maybe.
yeah. No, that was in a training drill as well. That wasn't
wow.
just a straight sprint.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Um,
I've also seen Usain Bolt at Soccer Aid hit 10 meters per second, which is around 36 kilometers an hour.
Wow, that's quick.
So- I can't even dream of hitting those numbers.
And he looked like he was jogging.
He is fluid.
goodness.
He's just biomechanically perfect. Is this always what you wanted to do?
No, I wanted to be, before university, I was looking at a parachute regiment, and then I was looking at potentially going into the police force. But I was just too interested in sport.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big little change, isn't it? And then finally,
It's a big difference.
on the topic of holidays, what's your dream holiday that you could never tell Jurgen Klopp you wanted to take?
Me and my girlfriend, she's brilliant. We've always wanted to do a tour or trip around Australia. So Australia was kind of my dream location. So we've always wanted to do, maybe start up in the Whitsundays or Brisbane, and obviously come down the East Coast, do Sydney, Melbourne. I've always wanted to kind of sit in the MCG and watch a 5-day test or something between England and Australia.
That'd be amazing.
Something like that, and then obviously finish in Perth and do like some shark diving or something like that. That's always been the dream.
Oh, jeez. I don't know how you'd have to explain to Stat Sports. Yeah, just 4 months off, please. Australia's massive. That would be amazing, though. Oh, yeah, no, massive thank you for coming on and just speaking to us and just telling us everything about basically data. I loved it. I've learned so much. So yeah, thank you so much, Alex.
And I don't know if it would even be something we could do, but it'd be great to somehow meet up and just get to see what you do in person and get that experience. I think that'd be amazing. I don't know if there's even scope.
Go to
do
HQ,
that, but if there is, yeah, exactly.
No, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
That would be amazing. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on, Alex. Really, really appreciate your time.